Hello everyone, my name is Emily and I will have a pleasure to run today's webinar dedicated to the topic of neurodiversity. In a moment, I will of course refer a bit more to the goal of our meeting and to the agenda, and then move on to the main parts of the topic. Although at the very beginning, especially that today's meeting has the form of the webinar, I need to check if everything works properly from the point of view of the quality. So I just need some short message from you. You can of course use chat for that, just to be sure that you can hear me, that you can see me, and that the quality is good. So I will just wait for some short comment from you, and then I will know that I can proceed with the further part of the meeting. So please let me know if everything works properly. You have, of course, chat for that. Perfect. I can see that it works, so I can move on. That's great. I never know if everything is okay because I can hear myself, but I don't hear you, so that is important for me to know it. Then coming back to the meeting today. The main goal of our meeting embraces better understanding what idea stands behind the neurodiversity. What are the specific features, among the others, connected with ADHD and the autism spectrum? And the most important part, I believe so at least, connected with our today's webinar, will be related to understanding how to communicate and how to collaborate better in the business environment at work, assuming that in fact all of us, we have some specific features and qualities that can be in fact challenging for the other people in collaboration. So we will see what kind of the behaviors, what kind of the tools, what kind of the rules can be incorporated to make sure that our daily, our routine collaboration communication will be at least a bit easier. I probably owe you also, for the very beginning, at least to those who don't know me, of course, a little bit of self-introduction. I guess I'm usually even saying that this is, let's say, like my method for everybody who is participating in my workshops, in my webinars or trainings, just to check if it is worth to stay with me, or maybe, well, there are some other different kind of the activities. But of course, I'm also aware that it's not about my self-presentation, but it's rather about what I'm going to present, and by that, you're going to make some kind of the assessment, evaluation, is it really worth or not? Nevertheless, if it is about my professional background, it relates strictly to human resources area. I've been working right now for around 15 years in HR, and I'm usually even saying that this is my heart. And in fact, my mission is to work with people, to work for people, to support them in their development, growth, and better understanding of one another. I had that fantastic opportunity in my career to work in different kind of the countries, to run different kind of the projects, to work on the projects, among the others, in the USA, in Dubai, in China. Currently, I'm located in Ireland. And I would say that the best lesson that I took from all these kind of the adventures, projects, and the possibilities of work with different kind of the people is the quality that I'm trying to really promote inside of myself. And that's about the humbleness. And in fact, that's also the reason why the topic of diversity, neurodiversity, is very close to me, because I believe that we can only understand people, we can only understand also others' behaviors, we can communicate better and collaborate better if we're going to be humble, if we're going to understand that maybe our behaviors are natural, normal to us, but they might be challenging or difficult even in understanding for the other people. And only when we are open, when we are curious, when we are humble, then in fact that kind of the collaboration and understanding of one another can really work. That's a bit about myself, and of course then I'm moving further to our today's topic, neurodiversity. Probably I could start, of course, from the definition, and that could be the simplest way I could do, although I decided to do it in a little bit reverse version. And I think it will be a little bit better to understand the idea behind neurodiversity, even to understand those specific features and qualities, if we're going to have a look at some practical example that probably each of us can meet in our daily routine, collaborating with different people. So let's have a look. And for that purpose, so for understanding, of course, both the definition, the features, the specifics of collaboration in the neurodiverse environment, what I would like you to do for the very beginning is to imagine that you are John. So put yourselves in the shoes of John and imagine such a situation that you work in a team with Kate. And Kate is a person who always seems to have time for everything. She is doing quite a lot of multitasking. She starts several tasks, but jumps from one to another instead of completing one task and only then moving to another. When a deadline is nearing, she suddenly drops everything and frantically rushes to finish the task. And well, what happens also when you collaborate, being that John with Kate, is that the data that she prepares, well, is not done correctly. The presentations that she executes have some kind of typos. The emails are written chaotically. So generally, you can see that there are some kind of the errors, there are some kind of the mistakes. And the thing is that currently you're working together on a project. And one of the tasks in that project is to prepare a presentation. You have a meeting in front of the client in 3 hours. And the thing is that Kate was supposed to prepare the presentation, and unfortunately, it is still not ready. So you haven't received that presentation. And in fact, you would like to have it because you should correct some kind of the typos. And when you ask for the presentation, what you hear from Kate is that she tells you, come on, relax, there is time. The presentation will be brilliant. Just have some tea or coffee instead of stressing. Additionally, there are no agreements between both of you on who will do what during the client's meeting. And when you ask about it, when you ask about the meeting schedule, about the agenda, you hear that it is like really enough that during that meeting you will flexibly adapt to the client. So let's say this is some kind of the context and situation that can happen in collaboration on that project, having John and having also Kate, and still being in the shoes of John. Can you consider what could be the first thought that could come to your mind if you met that situation, collaborating with Kate? Please don't think yet what you would do, how you would behave, but let it be only about the first thought that could come to your mind when you met that situation, being in the shoes of John. And I will in fact narrow down a little bit that thought because I decided to prepare 4 possible answers, assuming that it could be, I hope so, somehow associated with the thoughts that you could have being again in the shoes of John. So we could probably imagine 4 possible situations or 4 possible thoughts. The first would be that when that situation with Kate happens, there is that meeting, 3 hours left, no presentation prepared, no schedule, no agenda for the meeting. Let's say that probably the first thought of John, and please check if that could be somehow connected with your first idea, would be that John would think, what an irresponsible person. The project is so important and so much depends on winning it, and there can't be any kind of the mistakes. So let's say that would be the first version. The second probably would be that what John could think would be, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm enough. And I'm just going to the team leader because it's impossible to work with Kate. And I will either tell the team leader that he needs to manage this person, and ideally it would be if he moved or she moved her to another team. Or maybe you would choose the third version, the green one. And when you heard from Kate, relax, coffee or tea, you would think, well, actually, why not? I'll go get some coffee. Everything will be fine. Yeah, I know that Kate is quite chaotic. She starts multiple topics at once, but she's at the same time a great speaker. So fine, I'm just taking tea, coffee, a break, and everything will work perfectly. Or maybe you would rather focus on that black version, the fourth one. And you would think, well, in fact, okay, why not? Let me take that tea or coffee, and I will just watch as Kate stumbles in front of the client. I have had to explain myself so many times for presentations full of errors. So this time I'm not taking accountability, let it be on her. So we have 4 versions. And again, being in the shoes of John, if only you want, you can add your answer to chat. If there is anything that you believe that is quite similar to what you thought about this situation, being of course in the shoes of John, you can place it. If you would rather follow with the first, second, third, or fourth scenario, or maybe none of them is okay. And I can see that the first thought of one of you would be the first one. And you can of course still add anybody who wants. And at the same time, I would say that most probably quite a lot of us would follow with that first one. I'm just taking the comments. Okay, number 4 as well. Okay, a little bit of the revenge could be also taken. I would say that most probably it could happen that our first thought would be that first one, irresponsible person, especially if we are still in that shoes of John. Because assuming that what is important for him is that he needs some kind of the agenda. He needs planning. He likes order. He doesn't probably like imperfections. That's why he needs to double check the presentation. He has to correct any kind of the typos. So we can have some kind of the assumption or the picture of him that he is the person who is very well organized, very analytical. So in that case, we can also assume that he has completely different working style in comparison to Kate. And that can be the reason why his first thought would be the first one. What an irresponsible person. Of course, it doesn't mean that any of this answer is good or bad, because that's about communication. And in most cases, we can't say that anything is black or white in communication and collaboration, because that's about human beings. But at the same time, in that kind of the situation, if we assume that they both have different kind of the features, they have different kind of the working style, it can be annoying, frustrating, difficult and challenging for John to collaborate with Kate, and he can have that kind of the assumption, irresponsible person. And why? The reason is that we all fall into so-called projections. Projections are connected with the fact that in different kind of situations, when we collaborate and communicate with different kind of the people, what happens is that we are attributing various, often untrue intentions or emotions or motives to other people. In most cases, especially when other people have different behaviors and different qualities in comparison to us. And then automatically those projections happen. It doesn't mean, again, that there is something bad in that. It's just something very often unconscious. It's quite natural that we are going to fall into that. And another reason behind these projections and this difficulty in communication, for example, between John and Kate, will result from the fact that when we see other people, when we communicate and collaborate with other people, we can see only the top of the iceberg. So we can see only the behaviors of another person. So in that case, if we're going to see that it's 3 hours to the meeting and still the presentation is not done, or we're going to receive this presentation and we will see that there are some kind of the typos, automatically by behaviors, we're going to form some kind of the judgment, some kind of the generalization, some kind of the bias, assuming that, okay, if somebody is not prepared 3 hours before the meeting, irresponsible. If somebody doesn't have the agenda, come on, irresponsible. If somebody makes the typos, irresponsible. Not because that person is irresponsible, it's just that in our mind, that's the definition of the responsibility, because again, our behaviors are completely different. At the same time, if we reverse that situation, we can check a bit different perspective. So let's imagine that at this time we would put ourselves in the shoes of Kate, and probably she would perceive that situation in a completely different way. And being in her shoes, we could this time assume that Kate works in a team with John. And John is extremely detail-oriented. He's focused on perfect preparation of every kind of the task and topic. It has, of course, advantages because every presentation is very diligent, really impeccably crafted. Although, on the other hand, if there are any kind of the changes, any kind of alterations, any kind of the unexpected tasks to be done, what happens is that John is paralyzed and he's not able to do anything because he sticks to the initial agenda, to the initial plan and initial task. It's difficult to work for Kate with John because everything takes a lot of time. When you work on a project, as Kate, of course, together, he checks the data you prepare. He adjusts the colors. He constantly asks you if you have the data ready. So it feels to you, being Kate, that he sees you and he perceives you as incompetent, or he just thinks that you do not understand colors. In fact, the tasks could be done in 1 hour, and he does everything within 3 hours. Everything is being checked several times, although it is really not necessary. And apart from that, even if you try somehow to alleviate the tension and make the atmosphere a little bit more relaxed, and for example, you're going just to say some joke, there is no understanding from John. And of course, still, if it is about those modifications and improvements, he quite sticks to that initial version. And even every tiny, small, little change, for example, in the graphics in the presentation, if you propose it, if you suggest it, or if you do it, unfortunately, you can see that he gets nervous. He blocks himself, and it's very difficult to communicate with him, to understand him better. And in both of these cases, what we can see is that both of them, they have a bit different perspective. Kate has her qualities, her traits. The same is with John. And I'm not sure if in that even particular situation, which is just visible from those two standpoints, if there is anybody who is right or wrong. Because both of them, probably they are right. And both of them, they have some kind of embedded qualities that are quite natural to them. It's just because they have different type of the perception. It's just because they have different way of working. It can be quite challenging for them to understand each other. And unfortunately, if it happens that they are going to fall into those projections, they're going to incorporate some kind of the biases or some kind of the prejudice, some kind of the judgment, unfortunately, they will not be able to communicate. And there will be that kind of the assumptions, oh, that, for example, Kate is irresponsible, or John is so rigid and so inflexible. How can he manage nowadays? Those are all just judgments, because in our mind, because we use a lot of shortcuts, it can happen that thinking irresponsible or rigid, we will assume it's fact because in our mind, because of our personality, because of our traits and qualities, it is fact, although in reality, it is some kind of combination. Rather some kind of interpretation, not fact, because we can't say that he is responsible, it's a fact. It's just our, sometimes of course, observation, but very often it's just going to be our opinion or judgment. The same will work if we go a little bit further in their collaboration. Because let's assume that if John and Kate, they have to work on that project, at some point, one of them, if they're not going to sit together at the table and discuss that kind of the problems and issues that they have, probably one of them, they will have to change their way to that collaboration. And it could possibly, of course, happen that John will decide, okay, that's it. I'm not able to sit with Kate in the same room. I'm not able to talk with her because we can't find the common ground. It's not possible to communicate. It's like too disturbing for me to bear her personality even, or to bear her collaboration. So what would John do in that situation would be that he decides, okay, Still, we work on the same project, so I have to do something to be sure that we're going to meet the deadline, we're going to meet the goal. So maybe in that situation, what John can do is that he will decide maybe to write some kind of the email or write some kind of instruction, because if Kate is always making so many mistakes or some kind of the typos in that presentation, and for John it is like pretty annoying, what he can do to show that he has positive intentions, obviously, will be that he will prepare an instruction. He will write everything precisely, how to prepare the presentation, what should be included, what kind of information should be implemented in the presentation, how to design the presentation. There will be some kind of the bullet points. The most important information is going to be bolded. There will be maybe some kind of the infographics, like very nice, precise, accurate information and instruction with all that aspects. He will send it to Kate, being like probably quite happy and satisfied that right now he's showing again those positive intentions, and probably she will understand not to make the mistakes. She will read it, she will understand it, and then they will start more accurate work. And in the same situation, what Kate will do is that, of course, she will have a look at the presentation, at this instruction, sorry. She will have a look at that instruction. And the first thing she's going to do is that she will either call John, or she will just come to his office and she will say, so let's talk about that instruction, and maybe you can also show me how you want me these presentations to be done. And in that case, one of the first thoughts of John could be, come on, I prepared for you a perfect presentation. There is the instruction, there are those bullet points and everything like really very precisely described. Why are you coming to me? I can't stand you even right now. Maybe it will be still the thought, not something he will say. So despite the fact that he will have these positive intentions, he can still assume that something is wrong with Kate if she's coming instead of just reading the instruction and following it. And what's the issue here? Well, the thing is that we all have different perception modes. And it can happen that, for example, John is going to be the person who is the visualizer. So for him, if he's going to see something, read, underline, there will be those infographics. It will be very easy to understand something. It will be very easy to remember. But if we assume that Kate's reaction was that she came to him and she asked him to talk about this instruction, to have a look at it, to discuss how this instruction should be incorporated in practice, most probably we can assume that she is the kinesthetic. So she needs the variety of different kind of the stimuli. She needs, of course, to see the presentation, maybe some kind of the movie. She needs to discuss it, like different kind of the perspectives to be able to understand something. And that's the specific coming from our brain, that we have different perception modes, and very often there will be some kind of misunderstandings, there will be some kind of the issues, there will be some kind of the assumptions connected with those wrong intentions, just because we prepared something or we understand something in a specific way because we have to see, and the other person, they have to hear, they have to discuss, and for us it will be not normal. On purpose, I'm using that word normal because, frankly speaking, I don't even know what it means. Depending on the environment, depending on the society, some certain behaviors can be perceived as normal, while in the other societies, in the other environments, the same quality, the same perspective, the same behavior will be not normal. So usually when we talk about neurodiversity, that kind of embedded, encoded term happens, but still I have no idea what it even means, normal. But we often, of course, use it like, that's not normal that you behave in that way, or that kind of behavior is not normal. Of course, we shouldn't. And that's how we're moving to the definition of neurodiversity. Because if we wanted to clarify it a bit more, we could probably understand that neurodiversity is the natural variety of the human mind, which allows us to leverage different perspectives on perceiving the world. So we have some kind of the differences coming and stemming from our brain, some different perspectives connected with focus. Some of us will be monotasking, some of us will be multitasking. We have also different kind of the ways how we express our emotions. It is about our mood and our sensitivity to stimuli. We are different if it is about remembering something, if it is about learning. We even initiate and build relations in a different way. And that's about the neurodiversity, that each of us has different kind of the perspective on perceiving the world and also, of course, processing information. And for me, neurodiversity will have the widest understanding out of all the diversities. Because to some extent, if we think about the other aspects of diversity, we can say, well, that's also about the gender, because diversity is also about genders. But still, here we can say, among the others, that for example, we're going to have men and women. Diversity can be, of course, also about the age. We can talk about millennials and the different generations. But still, even if we think about different genders, even if we think about different generations, most typically we can't find something in common, some basic characteristics that are going to be mutual, are going to be similar for those specific, for example, types of the diversities. And the case with neurodiversity is that it relates to our brain. And the thing is that out of 8 billion people, there aren't 2 people who would have exactly the same brain. And I would even say that this is the magic of us people, of course not only, of us people, because of our construction of the brain, that each of us is individual, each of us is unique, and that's why we are so diverse. And once we're going to accept and acknowledge the fact that people are different, which doesn't mean worse or better. People are just simply different. And we may have some kind of the qualities, we may have some kind of the behaviors that are not going to be the same among the other people, that then probably are not going to be understood for other people. It means that also there are going to be some kind of the behaviors and traits that are not going to be understood by us. That's why it's so important, coming back to something what I mentioned at the very beginning, to be really open, to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of other people and to treat them not the way we want to be treated, but the way they want to be treated. And that's the key to communication. Of course, that's also the key, which is very difficult, and probably we will be struggling with better communication and collaboration for the several years. And why this neurodiversity term even exists? I would say that the main reason why it was created is because of stereotypes, because of stigmatization, because of generalization. Because from the medical point of view, we could say, come on, neurodiversity, really? Nothing like that exists. If we think about ADHD, if we think about the autism spectrum, that's disorder. That's it. And from the medical point of view, of course, and I don't want to question that, but again, the reason why we talk, or we are lately talking, in fact, because it started some time ago, why we are lately talking about the neurodiversity is that the term was created to decode all these stereotypes, this stigmatization, those biases, and those negative beliefs connected with different kind of the disorders. Because most probably, if we're going to still think, for example, about those 2 specifics as we are going to discuss them today, like for example ADHD and autism spectrum, we can think that there will be multitude of those different kind of stereotypes. So people will be using the phrases like those people, they are different. Oh, they have some kind of disorder, some kind of a disease. And here I also, again, don't want to question that phrase disorder, that there is anything negative in that. Because again, from the medical point of view, of course, that's a disorder. It's just that very often we have some kind of anchored convictions connected with words. And it might happen that when we're going to hear that somebody has a disorder, oh, there is something wrong with that person. And here comes neurodiversity. Because neurodiversity wants to concentrate on our personal unique characteristics, wants to show that we are simply different as human beings, and each of us, we have specific, unique, in that positive meaning, of course, features. We have our talents, and we can only contribute to ourselves and to the others. That's why for me, probably the best definition of neurodiversity, but it will be only my own subjective one, would be that this is just like the individual perception way. So for me, it wouldn't mean that neurodiversity has to be connected, for example, with ADHD, with autism spectrum, with information processing disorder, with, for example, high sensitivity. I would like to expand that definition and just concentrate on that brain construction which I mentioned, saying that again, each of us has individual characteristics. And even if, for example, we do not have ADHD, we do not have high sensitivity, we still have some specific features maybe associated with one of those, and that's it. And we have to first understand it, that we have this specific feature. We have to accept it, I would also say. That's very important. And only then we can also inform the other people about our characteristics, about our features, and by that understand also other people better. And still, from that reverse version, coming to the definition and coming to the characteristics of the neurodiversity, we can probably recall that example of John. So this time we're not putting ourselves into the shoes. It's not about collaboration, communication. Of course, in a moment it will be. But if we could think again about John and his characteristics, so the fact that he's very detailed oriented, that if there are any kind of the changes, it might be difficult for him to accept them, and he will be probably like frozen. If it is about the jokes, the fact that he doesn't understand the jokes, probably we can catch some of those characteristics which can mean that John has autism spectrum. On purpose, when I'm going to talk right now about both autism spectrum or ADHD, I will be rather saying it might happen, he might have, possibly, because otherwise I would create some kind of the either pigeonholing, or I would create some kind of the persona in which we would assume that everybody who has, for example, autism spectrum or everybody who has ADHD has that particular characteristics, and I don't want to do it. Especially that I can really lately see that on the one hand, people are gaining more and more knowledge and awareness in that area of those specifics. This time I will use the word disorders. But on the other hand, what I also met several times already is that people with that kind of the knowledge, they make, again, some kind of a shortcuts. And what they do is that if you're going to behave in some specific way, and they have somewhere there encoded in their mind that those are the typical characteristics, those are the typical traits of the person who has autism or, for example, ADHD, they will tell you, oh, but you don't behave in that way. So no, for sure you don't have it. Like, come on, I myself, I know my features, I know what kind of the qualities I have, or I was also maybe probably diagnosed, so I know who I am, and yes, that's about my specific features. That's why I will be rather saying might have, because it